The darkness of space had a way of seeping into your bones. Kale knew this better than most, having spent the last 7 years in exile on this derelict mining outpost orbiting a forgotten asteroid in the far reaches of the extended Kuiper Belt. He'd come to embrace the emptiness, the silence broken only by the wheezing of ancient air recyclers and the occasional ping of micrometeorites against the station's hull. At 42, Kale's body bore the scars of his former life as a corporate mining technician. His calloused hands moved methodically across the temperature control panel that perpetually threatened to plunge his living quarters into freezing darkness. Like everything else in this forsaken outpost, it was held together with improvised repairs and sheer stubborn will. "Hold together just a little longer," he muttered, tightening a loose connection. The panel blinked weakly before stabilizing, bathing his weathered face in a sickly green glow. Dinner was the same as it had been yesterday, and would be tomorrow, a nutrient paste that supposedly tasted like chicken but had long ago lost any semblance to actual food. Kale didn't mind. Taste was a luxury, and luxuries were things he'd left behind when Omnicorp had sacrificed his crew to cover up their illegal excavation of restricted materials on Ganymede's southern hemisphere. 12 good people, dead, and he, the sole survivor, branded a saboteur and fugitive. Kale swallowed the paste mechanically and gazed out the viewport at the asteroid field that had become his sanctuary. The rocks tumbled in their eternal dance, occasionally colliding with a silent violence that sent fragments spinning into new orbits. After so many years, he'd memorized the patterns, could predict which rocks would crash into each other, which would narrowly avoid collision. It was a pointless skill, but out here, routine kept you sane. The supply vessel would come in another 2 months. He would hide, as always, in the abandoned mining tunnels beneath the station, leaving payment for his meager supplies in the airlock. In 7 years, he'd never once spoken to the delivery pilot. Isolation was safety. Isolation was survival. The station's warning system jolted him from his thoughts, a harsh alarm he hadn't heard in years. The proximity sensors were registering unusual activity in the belt. A debris shower, possibly, or an uncharted meteor storm. Kale abandoned his half-eaten meal and moved quickly to the monitoring station. The main display showed what looked like a cascading wave of disruption moving through the asteroid field, rocks colliding chaotically as something tore through their usual pattern. And then, amidst the chaos, a small blip appeared on his radar, something that definitely wasn't an asteroid. A ship, badly damaged from what the sensors could tell. And it was on a collision course with a large asteroid about 4 kilometers from the station. Kale watched impassively as the blip disappeared behind the asteroid. A brief flash registered on his instruments. Impact. Then, something unexpected, a weak distress signal, broadcasting on all frequencies before abruptly cutting out. His hand hovered over the communications panel. 7 years of discipline told him to ignore it. Whatever poor soul had crashed out there wasn't his concern. Survivors meant witnesses. Witnesses meant connections to the world he'd fled. Connections meant danger. And yet, Kale closed his eyes, seeing again the faces of his crew as the mining tunnel collapsed, hearing their screams over the comm system as he scrambled helplessly to reach them, trapped on the wrong side of a security bulkhead. The silence that followed had never truly left him. "Damn it," he growled, slamming his hand against the wall. Before he could reconsider, he was pulling on his ancient EVA suit, checking its patched seams and worn life support systems. The helmet sealed with a hiss that didn't sound quite right, but it would have to do. The mining shuttle was little more than a glorified transport sled with attitude thrusters, designed for hauling or rather than rescue missions. Kale guided it awkwardly through the asteroid field, using minimal power to avoid detection by any passing corporate vessels that might be monitoring the sector. The crashed vessel came into view as he rounded the asteroid, a sleek escape pod of unfamiliar design, its hull torn open like a gutted fish. The craft had embedded itself deeply into the asteroid's surface, surrounded by a spray of debris and crystallized atmosphere that glittered in the distant sunlight. Kale tethered his shuttle to the asteroid surface and made his way carefully across the microgravity environment to the wrecked vessel. Through the shattered viewport, he could make out a dim, pulsing light inside. Using a mining laser at its lowest setting, he cut through the twisted metal to create an opening large enough to enter. The interior was in chaos, panels hanging loose, wires sparking, internal atmosphere venting into space through a dozen small breaches. And there, strapped to what appeared to be a pilot's chair, was a figure. Not human. Not exactly. The being had a humanoid form, but was more slender, almost delicate in its proportions. What struck Kale most was the skin, a pale, ice blue that seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. Along the arms and temples ran intricate patterns of bioluminescent lines that pulsed weakly, like a failing heartbeat. The alien was unconscious, blood of a startling violet hue seeping from multiple wounds. What looked like burn marks crossed its torso, and a deep gash ran along one side of its head. The clothing, a form-fitting garment made of some unfamiliar fabric, was torn and charred in places that suggested not just crash damage, but deliberate injury. Torture marks. Kale recognized them immediately. For a long moment, he simply stared. Every instinct screamed at him to leave, to pretend he'd never seen this, to return to his sanctuary of solitude. This wasn't just a crash pilot. This was something that could bring the full attention of authorities, corporations, maybe even military forces down on this forgotten corner of space. The alien's chest rose and fell almost imperceptibly. Still alive, but barely. "I'm going to regret this," Kale muttered inside his helmet, knowing there was no one to hear him. He carefully cut the restraints and gathered the lightweight figure into his arms. The being was surprisingly warm to the touch, even through his suit, and those strange bioluminescent markings flickered as if responding to his proximity. Getting the alien back to his shuttle was a clumsy process, made worse by the need to avoid further injury. Once inside, Kale sealed the cramped cabin and began the careful journey back to the station, constantly glancing between his navigation display and the unconscious figure strapped to the passenger seat beside him. Back at the station, Kale laid the alien on his own bunk and retrieved the medical kit he'd stolen from Omnicorp all those years ago. His knowledge of human medicine was limited to the emergency training all miners received. His knowledge of alien physiology was non-existent. But he could clean wounds, apply regenerative bandages, administer broad-spectrum antibiotics, and hope that alien biology wasn't too different from human. As he worked, Kale took in more details of his unexpected guest. The face was strikingly symmetrical, with high cheekbones and a delicate jaw that gave it an almost ethereal quality. No visible ears, just slight indentations where they should be. The eyes, closed now, were larger than human norm, with thick lashes. The nose was small but perfectly formed, and the mouth seemed similar to a human's, if slightly wider. The alien stirred slightly as Kale applied antiseptic to the head wound, those bioluminescent lines pulsing more rapidly. Then the eyes snapped open, revealing irises of the deepest indigo with no visible pupils, like twin midnight skies. The reaction was immediate and violent. The alien lashed out with surprising strength, scrambling backward on the bunk until pressed against the wall, a stream of unintelligible sounds pouring from its mouth. Those strange eyes darted around the room, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with obvious panic. Kale backed away, hands raised. "Easy," he said, keeping his voice low and calm. "I'm not going to hurt you. You crashed. I brought you here to help." The alien's gaze fixed on him, uncomprehending but intense. It clutched at its side, where one of the worst injuries lay, wincing visibly. Kale pointed to the medical supplies, then to the bandages he'd already applied to some of the alien's wounds. "Help," he repeated, then pointed to himself. "Kale." The alien watched him warily, breathing rapidly. After a moment, it raised a trembling hand to its chest. "Lyra," it said, the word clear despite the strange accent. Kale nodded slowly. "Lyra," he repeated. "A name? Or perhaps what its species called themselves?" The being, Lyra, seemed to relax fractionally, though pain was evident in the tightness around those strange eyes. "It's she?" The voice had sounded feminine to Cale's ears, glanced down at her injuries, then back at him. Cale gestured to the medical kit again. "May I continue?" Lyra stared at him for a long moment before giving a small, hesitant nod. Over the next few hours, Cale tended to Lyra's wounds as best he could, working slowly and telegraphing each movement to avoid startling her. Communication was limited to gestures and simple words, but he managed to convey his intention to help, and she gradually allowed him closer. When he finally finished, Cale retrieved a ration pack and a water container. "Food," he said, offering them to Lyra. "Water." She studied both items suspiciously before cautiously accepting the water. After a careful sip, her eyes widened slightly, and she drank deeply, as if suddenly aware of her extreme thirst. Cale left her with the food and retreated to the main control room, giving her space. His mind raced with questions and concerns. What was she? Where had she come from? Who had injured her? And were they looking for her? And most pressingly, what the hell was he going to do with an alien fugitive on his hands? He checked the perimeter sensors, scanning for any sign of pursuit. Nothing yet, but that didn't mean they weren't coming. With a heavy sigh, Cale poured himself a glass of synthetic whiskey, a luxury he allowed himself once a month, usually, and drank it in one burning gulp. He had a feeling he'd need the small comfort it provided in the days ahead. "What have you done, old man?" he muttered to himself, staring out at the endless field of asteroids that had been his only companions for 7 long years. "What have you done?" The days that followed established a cautious routine. Lyra spent most of the first day sleeping, her body clearly fighting to heal itself. When awake, she watched Cale with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. For his part, Cale gave her space, speaking occasionally in simple terms, pointing to objects and naming them. On the second day, Cale remembered the ancient translation software still installed on his personal datapad, a relic from when Omnicorp miners occasionally encountered settlers from the outer colonies who spoke evolved dialects of standard languages. He dug it out of storage and activated it. "Try speaking," he told Lyra, pointing to the datapad. "It might help us communicate." Lyra studied the device for a long moment before speaking a few words in her melodic language. The translation software hummed, analyzing, but returned only fragments. Danger pursued gratitude. It was a start. Over the following days, the software gradually built a rudimentary translation matrix as Lyra spoke more. Her quick intelligence became evident as she deliberately repeated phrases, seeming to understand the device's purpose. Within a week, while far from perfect, the translator allowed basic conversation. "You saved me," Lyra said one evening, the datapad rendering her musical speech in a flat, mechanical standard English. "What?" Cale, who had been repairing a faulty temperature regulator, paused. It was a question he'd been asking himself repeatedly. "I heard your distress call," he said simply. Many would ignore, especially one who hides. Her large eyes focused intently on him. Even with the improving translation, her speech patterns remained distinctive, dropping articles and sometimes inverting sentence structure. Cale's head snapped up. "What makes you think I'm hiding?" The luminescent patterns along Lyra's arms pulsed slightly. "This place. Isolated. No communications. You watch sensors constantly. You fear discovery." She paused. Like me, Cale sat heavily in the station's only comfortable chair, a salvage pilot's seat from an abandoned freighter. The synthetic whiskey bottle was half empty now, a testament to the strain of the past week. "Omnicorp," he said finally, the name tasting bitter on his tongue. "I work for them. Mining operation on Ganymede, Jupiter's moon. We found something we weren't supposed to find. Some kind of artifact or technology buried deep in the ice. Corporate ordered it brought up in secret, against all regulations." He took another swig from his glass, feeling the familiar burn. "There was an accident. Tunnel collapse. I was separated from my crew by a security bulkhead. Couldn't get to them. Couldn't help them." The memories surged as vivid as they'd been 7 years ago. 12 people. Friends. Family, some of them. All dead. Lyra watched him silently, those strange eyes unblinking. Corporation couldn't let the truth get out. Illegal mining, ignored safety protocols, unauthorized retrieval of unknown technology. They needed a scapegoat. Kale's laugh was hollow. Me. Sole survivor. They doctored the records, made it look like I'd sabotaged the supports. Claimed I was working for a competitor. He drained his glass. I ran. Stole a shuttle. Found this abandoned outpost. Been here ever since. The silence stretched between them, filled only by the constant hum of the station's life support systems. Your turn, Kale said finally. Lyra's luminescent markings dimmed slightly, as if in response to painful memories. Through the translator, she began her story. She was a scientist, or perhaps archivist was a better translation, from a peaceful species with remarkable biological properties. Her people, the Lorani, had evolved the ability to manipulate bioelectric energy fields, both within their own bodies and in their environment. This ability had led them to develop sustainable technologies that worked in harmony with living systems rather than exploiting them. A powerful interstellar corporation called Xylos had discovered the Lorani homeworld and, initially, established seemingly peaceful trade relations. But they had a hidden agenda: to acquire the Lorani's biological abilities and knowledge for military applications. They wanted our resonance technology, Lyra explained, the translator struggling with certain concepts. Our bodies can enhance natural energy flows, stabilize or disrupt electrical patterns, heal biological systems. Peaceful uses. Xylos saw weapons, control mechanisms, biological dominance. When the Lorani refused to share certain knowledge, Xylos had launched a surprise attack on their main research facility. All dead, Lyra said, her markings pulsing with what Kale now recognized as emotion. All my colleagues. I escaped with core data, knowledge that must not fall to Xylos. They hung me across stars. She touched the now-healing wounds on her body. They caught my ship, questioned me. Pain. The word came through clearly enough. I escaped again. Emergency vessel. Damaged in flight. Crashed here. Kale nodded slowly, the parallels between their situations not lost on him. Both fugitives from corporate greed and cruelty. Both carrying the weight of dead colleagues. Both hiding at the edge of known space. These abilities of yours, he asked cautiously, can you still use them? Lyra held out her hand, palm up. The luminescent markings along her arm brightened, and a small sphere of pale blue light formed above her palm, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Limited now. Injured. Weakened. The sphere flickered and died. But healing, growing stronger. Something beeped on the main console, drawing Kale's attention. He moved quickly to check the long-range sensors. A small blip had appeared at the edge of the detection range, moving in a systematic pattern that was decidedly not natural asteroid movement. What is it? Lyra asked, noting his sudden tension. Not sure, Kale replied, adjusting the sensor parameters. Could be a routine patrol or salvage operation. Could be nothing. Could be trouble. But in his gut, he knew someone was searching the asteroid field, and he doubted they were looking for mining opportunities. Over the next few days, Kale monitored the distant vessel's movements with growing concern. It was definitely searching, moving in a grid pattern through the asteroid field, occasionally stopping to investigate larger rocks or debris. It's an automated probe, he told Lyra as they watched the blip on the sensor display. Probably scanning for life signs, energy signatures, or specific materials. Xylos, Lyra said with certainty. The translator couldn't convey tone, but her dimmed bioluminescence and rigid posture spoke volumes. Kale nodded grimly. Probably. This outpost is shielded. Old mining technique to avoid corporate claim jumpers. Basic heat and radiation signatures are masked, and the asteroid we're anchored to has a high metal content that confuses most scanners. He ran a hand through his graying hair. But if they're thorough enough, persistent enough, they might eventually find us. Lyra stood straighter, her injuries now mostly healed thanks to both Kale's care and her own remarkable biology. Then we must prepare. The next weeks transformed Kale's solitary existence into something he had never expected to experience again: partnership. They worked together to enhance the station's stealth capabilities, with Kale applying his practical knowledge of mining operations and Lyra offering insights from her scientific background. Kale showed Lyra the labyrinthine tunnels that honeycombed the asteroid below the station, old mining shafts that could serve as escape routes or hiding places. They established emergency protocols, loadouts of essential supplies that could be grabbed in moments, and rendezvous points in the asteroid field should they become separated. As they worked, Kale found himself studying Lyra with increasing fascination. She moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost weightless despite the station's artificial gravity. Her intelligence was evident in how quickly she grasped complex systems, often suggesting improvements that Kale would never have considered. And those bioluminescent markings, they were like a secondary language, brightening with excitement or curiosity, dimming with concern or sadness. For her part, Lyra seemed equally intrigued by Kale. She asked endless questions about human society, technology, and biology, often expressing surprise at what she called such remarkable adaptation for a non-resident species. The distant probe continued its methodical search, gradually working its way closer to their hiding place. Twice they had to power down all non-essential systems and retreat into the mining tunnels when the probe came near enough that even their shielding might not conceal them. Agricultural platforms, his decision to join Omnicorp for the promise of adventure and wealth, the friends he'd made and lost. "I haven't spoken this much in 7 years," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Not sure I remember how to be around people anymore." "You are doing well," Lyra replied, her markings pulsing gently in what he had come to recognize as amusement. For a solitary human. When the alert system indicated the probe had moved on, they returned to the station, only to find that the probe had changed its search pattern. It was now spiraling inward toward their position with increasing precision. "They've detected something," Kale said grimly. "Maybe not us specifically, but something unusual enough to investigate." Lyra's markings darkened with concern. "How long? At this rate?" 3 days, maybe 4 before they pinpoint us." That night, as Kale checked the perimeter sensors for the 20th time, Lyra approached him with unusual solemnity. "I must tell you everything," she said. "You risked your life for me. You deserve full truth." Through the improved translator and with many clarifications, Lyra explained the full extent of what Xylos Corporation wanted. It wasn't just her people's resonance technology or biological data. The core data she had escaped with contained the complete genetic template for Lorani abilities. Information that could be used to engineer biological weapons that would work at the cellular level, potentially allowing control over any living organism. "Imagine a weapon that could turn body's energy against itself," she explained, "or override brain's electrical signals, control thoughts, trigger mass cellular death, or reprogram genetic structure to create loyalty, slavery." The implications were staggering. In the hands of a corporation like Xylos, such technology could mean dominance not just over competing companies, but over entire worlds. "Why you?" Kale asked. "Why were you the one to escape with this data?" Lyra's markings pulsed in a complex pattern he hadn't seen before. "I was lead researcher. I developed safeguards, ethical limitations to prevent misuse. Xylos wants data without safeguards. And..." She hesitated. "I'm also the data." "What do you mean?" "My genetic structure, my neural patterns. They are key to understanding entire system. Without me, data less useful. With me, they can extract, replicate, modify." Kale understood then why Xylos had tortured her, why they were hunting her so relentlessly. She wasn't just a scientist who had escaped with valuable information. She was the information, the living key to unlocking a technology that could reshape the balance of power throughout known space. "We need to get you somewhere safe," he said. "Somewhere beyond Xylos' reach." Lyra's large eyes fixed on him with startling intensity. "Such place exists." Kale had no answer. The probe's spiral search pattern continued to tighten. On what Kale calculated to be the final day before discovery, the station's long-range sensors detected a new signature, larger, more powerful, entering the asteroid field from the direction the probe had originally come. "That's not another probe," Kale said, studying the energy readings. "That's a military-grade vessel. Heavy weapons, advanced sensors." Lyra stood beside him, watching the approaching threat. "Command ship," she said simply. They implemented their escape plan, loading essential supplies into Kale's mining shuttle and preparing to abandon the station. But as the final preparations were underway, the proximity alarm blared. The command ship had suddenly accelerated, heading directly toward them with unmistakable purpose. "They found us," Kale said, abandoning the pretense of stealth and activating the station's minimal defensive systems. "The probe must have detected something definitive and relayed our position." The command ship entered visual range, a sleek predator of black metal and weapon ports that made no attempt to conceal its purpose. It took up position a kilometer from the station, close enough that Kale could see the corporate logo emblazoned on its hull, a stylized X that seemed to pulse with malevolent intent. The communications system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. Kale hesitated, then accepted it. A face appeared on the main display. Human, male, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. He wore a crisp uniform with commander's insignia. "Mining Station KX-17. This is Commander Forlag of the Xylos Corporation Enforcement Vessel Dominion," the man said, his tone professionally neutral but underlaid with threat. "Our scans indicate you are harboring a fugitive of interest to Xylos Corporation. Surrender this individual immediately." Kale exchanged glances with Lyra, who had positioned herself out of the transmission's visual field. "This is a private mining operation," Kale replied. "I don't answer to Xylos or any other corporation. I suggest you move on." Forlag's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. "We have no quarrel with independent miners, citizen. Our interest is solely in the Lurani fugitive. Surrender her, and you will be generously compensated for your cooperation. Say, 2 million credits and a fully equipped, modern mining vessel to replace that antiquated station. 2 million credits. Enough to disappear to the core worlds, create a new identity, live in comfort for the rest of his life. And a new ship. Not just freedom, but the means to go anywhere, do anything." All he had to do was hand over Lyra. Kale thought of the 12 crew members he couldn't save, of the nights he'd spent in this station, drowning in whiskey and regret, of the emptiness that had been his only companion for 7 years. Then he looked at Lyra, with her strange beauty and remarkable intelligence, her courage in the face of suffering, her determination to protect others from technology that could be monstrously misused. "I think you have the wrong station, Commander," Kale said, turning back to the screen. "There's no one here but me." Forlag's smile was cold as space itself. "Very well. I offered you the easy way, miner. Remember that." The transmission cut off. "They'll attack," Lyra said, her markings pulsing with anxiety. "Yes," Kale agreed, already moving to the station's defensive controls. "But we're not going to make it easy for them." The assault began with a targeted EMP burst that would have disabled most of the station's systems, if Kale hadn't already installed manual backups and hardened circuitry years ago, paranoid about just such an attack from Omnicorp. The lights flickered but stabilized as auxiliary power kicked in. "They'll send boarding teams," Kale said, checking the weapon locker. "The station's too valuable to simply destroy, especially if they want you alive." He distributed the weapons he had accumulated over the years, a mining laser repurposed as a crude but effective cutting weapon, a salvaged corporate security stunner, and several improvised explosives fashioned from mining charges. Lyra took the stunner, holding it awkwardly but with determination. "I can help another way," she said. Her bioluminescent markings brightened dramatically as she placed her hand on the station's main control panel. The lights throughout the station fluctuated, then steadied at a higher intensity. "I've enhanced power flow," she explained. "More efficient. Stabilized critical systems. Can also disrupt their scanning equipment temporarily, create false readings, hide our positions within station." The first boarding shuttle detached from the Dominion, a a sleek, predatory craft designed for rapid deployment of armed personnel. Kale tracked it on the external cameras as it maneuvered toward the main airlock. "Remember the plan," he told Lyra. "We're not trying to win a stand-up fight. We just need to hold them off long enough to reach the mining shuttle." The station shuddered as the boarding craft made a hard dock at the main airlock. Kale and Lyra retreated to their predetermined positions. Kale with a clear line of fire down the main corridor, Lyra concealed in a maintenance duct where she could use her abilities to disrupt the attacker's equipment. The inner airlock door exploded inward with a deafening boom, and smoke grenades tumbled through, filling the corridor with dense chemical fog. Through the haze came armored figures, weapons raised, moving with the precision of well-trained mercenaries. Kale triggered the first trap, a jury-rig mining charge that sent a spray of metal fragments down the corridor. Two of the boarders went down, but the others pressed forward, returning fire with energy weapons that scorched the walls where Kale had been a moment before. From her hiding place, Lyra focused her energy. The mercenaries' helmet displays flickered and died, their communications filled with static, their weapon targeting systems malfunctioned. In the confusion, Kale picked off another with a precisely aimed laser blast. But there were too many. As the first wave regrouped, a second boarding craft attached to the auxiliary airlock, disgorging more troops into the station. Kale and Lyra were forced to fall back, stage by stage, through the station toward the mining tunnels. In a narrow maintenance corridor, they made another stand. Kale had rigged the overhead coolant pipes to burst on command, spraying supercooled liquid that instantly flash froze on contact with air or armor. 3 mercenaries were immobilized, trapped in poses of attack like macabre ice sculptures. "This way," Kale gasped, pulling Lyra toward a service hatch that led to the lower levels. They descended quickly, pausing only to seal and weld shut access points behind them. In the dimly lit mining tunnels beneath the station, they had the advantage. Kale knew every twist and turn, every deadfall and hidden chamber. They led the pursuers on a maddening chase through the labyrinth, picking them off one by one with ambushes and traps. But Commander Forlag was no fool. Recognizing the disadvantage to his forces, he ordered a tactical retreat. As the last of the mercenaries withdrew to the Dominion, Kale allowed himself a moment of hope. "They're pulling back," he said, checking the station's sensors from a remote access point in the tunnels. "Maybe they've decided we're not worth the trouble." Lyra shook her head, her markings pulsing with concern. "Forlag does not give up. Changes strategy only." She was right. Minutes later, the station rocked violently as the Dominion opened fire with its main weapons. Not aiming to destroy, that would risk killing Lyra, but methodically cutting off sections of the station, sealing escape routes, herding them toward the remaining dock where Kale's mining shuttle waited. "They're forcing us to the shuttle bay," Kale realized. "They know it's our only way off the station." Another blast shook the tunnels, causing dust and small rocks to rain down on them. A support beam groaned ominously. "We need to move," Kale urged. "This whole section could collapse." They made their way through increasingly unstable tunnels toward the hidden access point that would bring them up near the shuttle bay. As they emerged into a storage room one level below their destination, Kale's remote sensor feed showed what they were up against. A squad of elite mercenaries had taken positions around the shuttle bay, waiting for them. "We'll never break through that blockade," Kale muttered. Lyra's markings pulsed with sudden intensity. "I have idea. Risky," she explained quickly. Using the last of her recovered strength, she could generate a massive bioelectric pulse, essentially a controlled version of what had disabled the probe during her escape from Xylos. It would temporarily overload all electronic systems in the vicinity, including the mercenaries' weapons, armor, and communications. But it would also affect the station's remaining systems and possibly the shuttle itself. "The shuttle has manual backup systems," Kale said, considering. "If we can reach it during the confusion, I might be able to get it started without electronics." "The pulse will..." Lyra hesitated, searching for the right words. "Drain me completely. I will be unconscious, helpless." You must carry me. Kale nodded grimly. I won't leave you behind. They positioned themselves in a maintenance shaft directly beneath the shuttle bay. On Kale's signal, Lyra closed her eyes, her bioluminescent markings brightening to an almost painful intensity. The air around her seemed to shimmer and distort, her entire body becoming a conduit for energy that gathered from the environment itself. Then she released it, a silent wave of force that Kale felt rather than heard, a pressure that passed through him and outward in all directions. The lights died instantly. All around them, equipment shut down with dying whines and clicks. Lyra collapsed into Kale's arms, her markings completely dark for the first time since he'd found her. Her body was alarmingly cool to the touch, but he could feel a pulse, weak but steady. Carrying her unconscious form, Kale climbed the maintenance ladder to the shuttle bay. As expected, chaos reigned. The mercenaries' advanced armor had locked up when the systems failed, leaving them struggling like beetles on their backs. Those who had managed to remove helmets or gauntlets were disoriented, shouting confused orders in the emergency lighting. Kale moved swiftly through the confusion, using shadows and stacked cargo as cover. Reaching the shuttle, he placed Lyra gently inside before sealing the hatch and rushing to the controls. As he'd hoped, the shuttle's manual systems were unaffected by the pulse. With practiced movements, he engaged the mechanical starter, feeling a surge of relief as the engines rumbled to life. The shuttle's minimal electronics would need time to reset, but the basic flight systems were operational. He disengaged from the docking clamps and fired the maneuvering thrusters, guiding the shuttle out of the bay just as the mercenaries began to recover. A few small arms fire pinged harmlessly off the hull as they cleared the station. The Dominion loomed before them, its massive weapons ports beginning to track their small vessel. But Lyra's pulse had affected it too. Not enough to disable such a large ship completely, but enough to disrupt its targeting systems and power distribution. Kale pushed the mining shuttle to its limits, weaving through the asteroid field with the skill of someone who had navigated it for years. The Dominion attempted pursuit, but its bulk made it ill-suited for the tight maneuvering required among the tumbling rocks. When they finally cleared the asteroid field, Kale set course for deep space, away from known shipping lanes and patrol routes. Only then did he engage the autopilot and turn his attention to Lyra. She remained unconscious, her skin cool to the touch, the bioluminescent markings completely dark. Kale checked her vital signs as best he could, confirming a steady, if weak, pulse and shallow breathing. He covered her with an emergency thermal blanket and gently secured her to the co-pilot's seat. "Hang on," he whispered, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "Just hang on." The mining shuttle was never designed for long-distance travel. Its life support systems were basic, its engines optimized for short hauls rather than sustained flight. But Kale had modified it over the years, adding extra oxygen recyclers and fuel capacity. It would get them somewhere, though where exactly, he had no idea. For 3 days, the shuttle drifted through the empty void beyond the Kuiper Belt, its minimal engines pushing it steadily away from the only home Kale had known for 7 years. He rationed the emergency supplies, taking only what was necessary for himself and focusing on keeping Lyra stable. On the 3rd day, as he was checking her pulse for the 100th time, her skin suddenly warmed beneath his fingers. The bioluminescent markings along her arms flickered weakly, like a dying light struggling to reignite. "Lyra." Kale leaned closer, hope rising in his chest. "Lyra, can you hear me?" Her large, indigo eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then gradually sharpening as they found his face. "Kale." Her voice was barely audible, the translator struggling to pick it up. "You saved me. Again." "We saved each other," he corrected, relief making his own voice rough. "Your pulse took out their systems long enough for us to escape." Lyra tried to sit up but fell back weakly. "Depleted. Need time to recover." "We've got time," Kale assured her, though it wasn't entirely true. According to his calculations, they had perhaps 2 weeks of life support remaining and no destination in sight. But that was a problem for later. "Rest now." As the days passed, Lyra gradually regained her strength. Her bioluminescent markings brightened, and she began to move around the confined space of the shuttle, though still with evident fatigue. She spent hours gazing out at the stars, her expression unreadable. Cale found himself watching her when she wasn't looking. There was something mesmerizing about her otherworldly grace, the way her markings pulsed with her emotions, the thoughtful intelligence behind those strange eyes. After 7 years of solitude, her presence filled a void he hadn't fully acknowledged. On the 10th day, as they shared a meager meal of rehydrated protein, Lyra placed her hand over a wound on Cale's arm, a deep gash he'd received during their escape from the station. "May I?" she asked. Cale nodded, curious. Lyra's markings brightened as she closed her eyes in concentration. A warm sensation spread through Cale's arm, not unpleasant but strange, like gentle electricity flowing beneath his skin. When she removed her hand, the wound had closed significantly, the angry red edges now a healthy pink. "How did you—" "Bioelectric resonance," she explained, "stimulates natural healing processes, accelerates them. Not complete healing, would require more strength than I have now, but better." Cale examined his arm in wonder. "Could you do this for yourself? For your own injuries?" "More difficult. Requires more energy to heal self. But yes, I've been doing so. Slowly." She demonstrated by showing him her side, where the worst of her injuries had been. The deep wound was now a pale scar, barely visible against her ice-blue skin. "That's remarkable," Cale said. "A small thing. Basic application of what my people—" She stopped suddenly, her markings dimming. "My people. We may all be gone now." Cale recognized the expression of grief and survivor's guilt that crossed her face. He'd seen it in his own reflection countless times. "You don't know that for certain," he said gently. "And even if the worst happened, you're keeping their knowledge alive. Their achievements, their memory." Lyra's large eyes studied him. "As you do for your crew." "I try," Cale admitted. "Some days better than others." They sat in companionable silence for a time, two survivors united by loss, drifting among the stars. On the 14th day, with life support systems beginning to show critical warnings, Cale finally voiced the concern that had been growing in his mind. "We need a destination," he said, studying the navigation charts. "Somewhere beyond Xylos's reach, if such a place exists." Lyra joined him at the controls, her now familiar presence at his side, strangely comforting. "Outer colonies," she suggested. "Independent settlements. Or neutral research outposts." Cale shook his head. "Most of those answer to one corporation or another, whether openly or secretly. Xylos has reach, resources, and they clearly value what you carry enough to commit significant assets to finding you." "What about?" Lyra hesitated. "What humans call shadow markets. Places where corporations have no authority." "You mean criminal havens?" Cale raised an eyebrow. "Those exist, but they have their own dangers. Everyone has a price, and Xylos could offer a fortune for information about you." They fell silent again, the reality of their situation weighing heavily. The vastness of space offered infinite hiding places, but life required resources: air, food, water, heat, and those necessities tethered them to civilization in some form. That night, as Cale dozed fitfully in the pilot's seat, he was awakened by a gentle touch on his arm. Lyra stood beside him, her bioluminescence casting soft blue light through the darkened cabin. "Need to speak with you," she said, her expression solemn. "About future. About us." Fully awake now, Cale gestured to the co-pilot's seat. Lyra sat, her movements still carrying that ethereal grace despite the confined space. "Among my people," she began, the translator rendering her words with increasing accuracy as she spoke, "there is an ancient tradition. When two beings face death together, save each other's lives, and choose to bind their paths forward, this creates a bond that transcends ordinary relationships." Her markings pulsed in complex patterns that Cale had begun to recognize as indicating deep emotion or significance. "This bond is called Thauramiri in my language. The closest translation might be life partners forged in fire, or perhaps souls who have witnessed each other's true nature in the face of extinction. Kale listened intently, struck by the solemnity with which she spoke. It is rare, especially between different species or cultures. But when it occurs, it is recognized as something profound. Not merely a practical arrangement, or even what humans call romance, but a recognition that your life and mine are now fundamentally interwoven. She paused, seeming to gather courage, then looked directly into his eyes. In my language, I would call you Elvari, my life bonded. She hesitated, searching for the right word, husband. Kale's breath caught. The word hung between them, carrying weight and implications that transcended cultural differences. Understand if this seems strange to you, Lyra continued quickly. Human customs may be very different, but I wanted you to know the significance of what has passed between us from my perspective. You are no longer simply Kale who rescued me. You are Kale who fought beside me, who chose my welfare above his own safety, who linked his fate with mine. In the silence that followed, Kale reflected on the strange journey that had brought him here. 7 years of isolation, of running from his past, of believing that connection was a luxury he could never again afford. Then Lyra had crashed into his life, bringing danger, but also something he had never expected to find again. Purpose, belonging, a reason to fight rather than simply survive. Not so strange, he said finally, his voice rough with emotion. Humans have similar concepts. Different words, maybe, but the same core idea. He reached out hesitantly, taking her slender hand in his calloused one. I accept what you offer, Lyra. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Her markings brightened like stars coming alive, illuminating the small cabin with ethereal blue light. The translator couldn't capture whatever she said next in her native tongue, but the meaning was clear in the way she squeezed his hand, in the luminescence that pulsed between them like a shared heartbeat. The navigation console beeped suddenly, breaking the moment. A small anomaly had appeared on the long-range scanners. Not a ship or known celestial body, but something that didn't match the star charts. What is it? Lyra asked, leaning forward. Kale adjusted the sensors, focusing on the anomaly. Not sure. Could be a sensor ghost or... He frowned, enhancing the image. It looks like some kind of structure. Artificial. They altered course toward the mysterious reading, hope and wariness mingling equally. As they drew closer over the next day, details emerged. A cluster of interconnected habitats and docking structures built into and around a small, irregular asteroid. No identifying markers or broadcast signals. No corporate logos or official designation. It's a free outpost, Kale said with growing excitement. An independent colony off the grid. Such places existed on the fringes of known space. Communities of outcasts, refugees, and those who rejected corporate domination. Some were little more than pirate havens, but others were genuine attempts to build societies beyond corporate control. Could be sanctuary? Lyra asked, her markings pulsing with cautious hope. Maybe, Kale replied. At the very least, a place to resupply and gather information. But we approach carefully. Could be friends, could be trouble. As they neared the outpost, a weak transmission reached them, not a challenge or warning, but a simple navigational beacon with docking instructions. Whoever ran this place wasn't particularly concerned about screening arrivals. Kale guided the shuttle toward the designated docking port, a retrofitted mining bay similar to the one they'd fled from what now seemed like a lifetime ago. As the airlock cycled and pressure equalized, he and Lyra prepared themselves for whatever awaited. Stay close, Kale said, checking the small laser pistol he'd brought from the station. Let me do the talking until we know more about this place. Lyra nodded, pulling the hood of her makeshift cloak over her distinctly non-human features. The bioluminescent markings on her arms dimmed to near invisibility. A skill she'd explained was used by her people for rest periods, but also served as natural camouflage when needed. The inner airlock door opened to reveal a bustling docking area unlike anything Kale had expected. People of various origins moved purposefully among vessels of all descriptions, from sleek courier ships to cobbled-together transports that made Kale's shuttle look well-maintained. The air smelled of machine oil, exotic spices, and the indefinable scent of too many beings in too small a space. No one paid them particular attention as they stepped cautiously into the flow of activity. No security checks, no customs officials, just the organized chaos of a trading post operating outside official jurisdiction. Signs in multiple languages directed them towards something called the Nexus Hub. Following them, Kale and Lyra emerged into a large, open area that seemed to be the heart of the outpost. Market stalls lined the walls, offering everything from fresh produce grown in hydroponic gardens to salvage tech of questionable origin. In the center, clusters of mismatched tables and chairs served as a communal gathering space where dozens of conversations in various languages created a constant buzz of sound. "Remarkable," Lyra whispered, her large eyes taking in everything from beneath her hood. "So many different beings coexisting. Let's find out who runs this place," Kale suggested, guiding them toward what appeared to be a central information terminal. The terminal directed them to the administration office, a grand name for what turned out to be a converted cargo container with a faded banner proclaiming Harmony Outpost. No core, no kings, no masters. Inside, they found a grizzled woman with cybernetic augmentations visible along her jawline and left arm, reviewing data on multiple floating screens. She glanced up as they entered, assessing them with sharp eyes that suggested military background. "New arrivals, eh? Welcome to Harmony. I'm Director Sidira. If you're running from something, don't tell me." Plausible deniability. "If you're looking to cause trouble, don't. We handle things efficiently here." Her direct approach was refreshing after years of corporate doublespeak. Kale introduced himself simply as a former miner looking for a fresh start, with Lyra as his partner. No details, no backstory, just enough to establish presence. "We need supplies, possibly work, and information," he concluded. Sidira nodded. "Standard arrangement is 3 days visitor status while you figure things out. Need longer, you contribute to the community somehow, skills, labor, trade goods, whatever you've got. We don't use corporate currency. Barter system and internal credit for most transactions." She studied them more carefully, gaze lingering on Lyra's concealed form. "Your partner doesn't talk much. Medical condition," Kale said smoothly. "Affects her vocal cords, among other things." If Sidira suspected more, she didn't press. "Temporary quarters available in Hab Block C. Basic necessities included. After that, you work something out or move on. That's the deal." As they left the administration office with access codes to their temporary quarters, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a tentative sense of possibility. This outpost, hidden from corporate eyes, might offer, if not permanent sanctuary, then at least a respite, a chance to plan their next move. Their assigned quarters were Spartan but clean. A single room with basic furnishings, recycled air that smelled faintly of algae, and walls thin enough that the constant hum of the outpost machinery provided a constant backdrop. "What you think?" Lyra asked once they were alone, lowering her hood and allowing her markings to brighten to their natural state. "It's not paradise," Kale replied, testing the firmness of the sleeping platform, "but it might be what we need right now. A place to catch our breath, figure out longer-term options." Lyra moved to the small viewport that looked out on the asteroid field surrounding the outpost. "Remind me of your station. Isolated, self-contained, survivors making life in harsh conditions. But not alone," Kale noted, coming to stand beside her. "That's the difference." They spent the next days exploring the outpost, carefully maintaining Lyra's disguise while learning the rhythms and rules of their temporary haven. Harmony Outpost, they discovered, had been founded 15 years earlier by a coalition of corporate deserters, political refugees, and independent traders who sought freedom from the expanding reach of the major interstellar corporations. Its location, in a dense asteroid field that played havoc with standard navigation systems, provided natural protection. Additional security came from a network of early warning sensors and a small but determined defense force composed of residents with military backgrounds. The outpost maintained its independence through self-sufficiency in essential resources and a strict policy of neutrality in larger political conflicts. Most importantly for Kale and Lyra, it operated on a no-questions-asked basis regarding residents' pasts, provided they adhered to the community's basic rules. Contribute, don't threaten the outpost's security, and resolve disputes through the established mediation system. On their third day, as their visitor status neared its end, Kale secured a position maintaining the outpost's aging environmental systems, work well suited to his experience with the similarly cobbled-together life support on his mining station. Lyra, with her scientific knowledge, found a role assisting in the hydroponic gardens where the outpost grew much of its food supply. Their separate duties often left them apart during the station's artificial day cycle, but each evening they returned to their small quarters, sharing the experiences and observations of their time apart. These quiet hours became a cherished ritual, a small pocket of peace in lives that had been defined by danger and flight. 2 weeks into their stay, as they sat sharing a meal of synthesized protein and surprisingly flavorful hydroponic vegetables, Lyra placed her hand over Kale's. "I've been thinking," she said, her markings pulsing with what he now recognized as a combination of nervousness and determination. "About Xylos. About the data I carry." Kale set down his utensil. "What about it? Cannot run forever. Eventually, they find us or others like them discover what I know. Technology, 1, protect. 2, dangerous to exist. 2, valuable to destroy. What are you suggesting?" Lyra's gaze was steady. "There are rumors here. Whispers of resistance against corporate control. Networks of scientists, former corporate researchers who left when they saw their work misused. Perhaps they could help secure the knowledge, ensure it used only for healing, for benefit." Kale considered this. He'd heard similar murmurs during his work shifts. References to something called the Accord, a loose alliance of settlements and individuals working to counter corporate dominance and share vital resources and information outside official channels. "It's risky," he said finally. "Reaching out means exposing ourselves, potentially revealing your presence here. Risk of doing nothing is greater," Lyra countered. "Xylos continues searching. Data degrades over time without proper storage. And she hesitated, "I wish to do more than hide. My people value knowledge as tool for growth, for improvement. Not to be hoarded, nor destroyed, but shared with wisdom and care." Kale recognized the resolve in her voice. After weeks of recovery and relative safety, the brilliant scientist she had been before her ordeal was reasserting herself, unwilling to remain passive in the face of larger threats. "All right," he agreed. "We'll start asking careful questions, feel out potential allies. But we move slowly, verify everything. The wrong trust could be fatal." Lyra's markings brightened with gratitude and something deeper, a recognition of his support that needed no translation. Over the following weeks, they cautiously expanded their network of contacts within Harmony Outpost. Kale found allies among the former corporate workers who maintained the station's infrastructure, individuals who had their own reasons to hate the machinations of companies like Xylos and Omnicorp. Lyra, despite maintaining her disguise, formed connections with the scientific community, refugees from corporate research divisions who now use their knowledge for the benefit of independent settlements. 3 months after their arrival, their patience was rewarded. Through a chain of carefully cultivated contacts, they secured a meeting with a representative of the Accord, a soft-spoken woman named Ellis, whose weathered face and penetrating gaze hinted at a life spent fighting battles, both open and clandestine. In a secure room deep within the outpost's administrative section, with jamming devices preventing electronic surveillance, Lyra revealed herself fully to Ellis, removing her concealing garments, allowing her bioluminescent markings to pulse freely, and explaining the full significance of the knowledge she carried. Ellis listened without interruption, her expression shifting from cautious interest to deep concern as the implications became clear. Bioelectric manipulation at the cellular level, she said when Lyra finished. Resonance technology that could heal worlds or enslave them. No wonder Xylos haunts you so relentlessly. Can your network help protect this knowledge? Kale asked. Ensure it's used only as Lyra's people intended? Ellis leaned back, considering. The Accord has resources, secure facilities, brilliant minds committed to ethical science, defenses against corporate intrusion. But nothing is impenetrable, especially against an entity with Xylos' reach. She focused on Lyra. The safest approach would be to distribute the knowledge, not the dangerous applications, but the foundational research among multiple secure locations. No single point of failure, no single target. Like my people did, Lyra said softly. Knowledge held by many, full understanding by few, applications requiring consensus. Exactly, Ellis nodded. We would need time to prepare the secure transmissions, establish the proper protocols. Perhaps 2 weeks. As they finalized arrangements for the knowledge transfer, Ellis provided another piece of information. Rumors of other Lorani survivors who had escaped the initial Xylos attack and scattered to remote locations. Nothing confirmed, but consistent reports from reliable sources suggesting Lyra might not be the last of her kind. Hope flickered in Lyra's eyes at this news, her markings pulsing with an intensity Kale had never seen before. The possibility, however remote, that others of her people might have survived gave new urgency to protecting the knowledge she carried, not just for the galaxy at large, but for the future of her own species. The night before the scheduled knowledge transfer, as they prepared for sleep in their small quarters, an urgent alert sounded throughout the outpost, the proximity warning that signaled an approaching vessel. Moments later, Director Sidura's voice came over the general communication system. Attention all residents. Unidentified corporate class vessel approaching. Defensive posture initiated. Non-essential personnel to designated shelter areas. This is not a drill. Kale and Lyra exchanged alarmed glances. They had known this moment might come, had prepared for it, but the reality still sent a chill through them both. Could be coincidence, Kale said, gathering the emergency packs they kept ready. Could be a routine corporate patrol, or traders with legitimate business. Not coincidence, Lyra replied, her markings dimming with apprehension. Forlock found us. The outpost's external communications system crackled to life, broadcasting the incoming transmission throughout the station as was protocol during potential threats, ensuring all residents had the same information. A familiar voice filled their quarters, confirming Lyra's fear. Harmony Outpost. This is Commander Forlag of the Xylos Corporation Vessel Dominion. We have reason to believe you are harboring fugitives of interest to Xylos. Surrender them immediately or face the consequences of corporate enforcement action. Director Sadir's response was immediate and firm. Xylos vessel, this is Harmony. We recognize no corporate authority in this territory. Your presence is unwelcome. State your specific accusation or withdraw. Forlag's laugh was cold even through the transmission. Director, let's dispense with the theater. We both know your so-called independent outpost exists only because corporations haven't found it worth the effort to claim. That calculation has changed. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. We need to reach Ellis, Lyra said urgently. Complete the knowledge transfer before. An explosion rocked the outpost, sending them staggering against the walls. Emergency systems activated, bathing the corridors in red warning lights as they emerged from their quarters. All around them, residents moved with practiced efficiency toward defensive positions or shelter areas. Many carried weapons. Not the advanced corporate arsenal that Forlag commanded, but the improvised but effective arms of people determined to protect their home. They found Ellis at the Secure Communications Center, already coordinating with other members of the Accord network. They've disabled our outer defenses, she reported grimly. Precision strikes. They knew exactly where to hit us. We have maybe 30 minutes before they breach the main structure. We need to complete the transfer, Lyra insisted. Ellis nodded. Systems ready. But it will take time to transmit everything securely, time we may not have. Then we defend this position until the transfer is complete, Kale said, checking the laser pistol he'd brought from his mining station. By whatever time we need. Throughout the outpost, the defense was organizing, barricades erected at strategic positions, ambush points established in narrow corridors, emergency protocols activated to protect non-combatants. These people had built their home knowing this day might come, and they faced it with grim determination. Kale joined a group of defenders at a choke point leading to the communication center, while Lyra began the painstaking process of transferring her knowledge to the Accord secure network. Her bioluminescent markings pulsed with intense concentration as she interfaced with the system, translating complex Lorani concepts into forms the network could interpret and distribute. The first wave of Xylo's security forces breached the outer airlocks 20 minutes later. Heavily armored and wielding corporate-grade weapons, they advanced methodically through the outpost. The defenders fought with the advantage of familiar territory and the desperation of those protecting their home, but were steadily pushed back by superior firepower and numbers. Explosions and weapons fire echoed through the station as Kale and his group held their position outside the communication center. Through brief updates from defenders at other positions, they learned that Forlag was leading the assault personally, driving his forces forward with ruthless efficiency. Transfer at 60%, Ellis reported from inside. Need at least 15 more minutes. A massive detonation shook the corridor, and acrid smoke began filling the air as the environmental systems struggled to compensate. Through the haze, Kale saw the first Xylo's troops appear at the far end of the corridor, methodically advancing behind portable shield generators. The defenders opened fire, forcing the attackers to slow their advance, but it was clear they would eventually be overwhelmed. Next to Kale, a woman who had introduced herself as a former corporate security officer, now turned outpost defender, fell with a cry, her shoulders seared by an energy weapon. "Get back to Ellis and Lyra," ordered the defense coordinator, a grizzled veteran who had once served in a corporate military force. "Help complete that transfer. We'll hold them as long as we can." Kale hesitated, unwilling to abandon the defensive line, but recognized the priority. The knowledge Lyra carried was more important than any single position or even the outpost itself. He made his way back to the communication center, finding Lyra still deep in the transfer process, her entire body glowing with effort as she channeled information into the system. Ellis monitored progress, occasionally adjusting parameters to maintain the secure connection despite the chaos engulfing the outpost. 80%, Ellis reported as he entered. "But Xylos is jamming our outgoing transmissions. We're routing through backup systems, but it's slowing everything down." Another explosion, closer this time, sent vibrations through the floor. The defending fire from the corridor grew less frequent, a bad sign. Kale checked the room's defenses, a reinforced door that would hold for a time, but not indefinitely against corporate breaching equipment. A secondary exit that led to emergency evacuation pods, but would mean abandoning the transfer before completion. "How much longer?" he asked. 10 minutes minimum, Ellis replied, not looking up from her console. The sounds of fighting grew louder, punctuated by the distinctive whine of corporate energy weapons and the sharper cracks of the defenders' more conventional firearms. Then, abruptly, silence fell, more ominous than the battle sounds had been. The communication system crackled. "Attention, remaining defenders." Forlag's voice, calm and almost amused. "Your resistance has been noteworthy, if futile. I am prepared to offer terms. Surrender the Lorani and her human companion, and the outpost will be spared further damage. You have 5 minutes to comply." Ellis looked up, her expression grim. "He's lying. Xylos never leaves witnesses to this kind of operation." "Agreed," Kale said. "But he's also buying time, positioning his forces for the final push." Lyra's voice came softly from the transfer station, her eyes still closed in concentration. "Transfer at 90%. Need few more minutes." Kale made his decision. "Ellis, prepare a secondary route for Lyra to the evacuation pods." Once the transfer is complete, get her out of here. What about you? Ellis asked, already working on her console to implement the plan. I'm going to buy you that time. Before either could object, Kale moved to the communications panel and opened a channel. Commander Forlock. This is Kale, the human companion you're seeking. I'm prepared to surrender myself. Alone. There was a momentary pause before Forlag responded, suspicion evident in his voice. An interesting offer. And the Lirani. She's not here. Left the outpost weeks ago on an independent transport. I stayed behind. The lie came easily. I'm unarmed. I'll meet you in the central hub. Another. Pause, longer this time. Kale could imagine Forlag weighing the truthfulness of his claim against the risk of a trap. Finally, the commander's voice returned. Very well. Cease all resistance. My forces will escort you to the central hub. Any signs of deception, and we resume the assault with no further offers of clemency. Kale turned to find Lyra's eyes open, watching him with an expression of anguish, her markings pulsing with distress. No, she said simply. The transfer needs to complete, Kale replied firmly. I'm just creating a distraction. Ellis will get you to the evacuation pods. He moved to her side, touching her face gently. Trust me, an Aelvari. We've come too far to fail now. The Lirani word, husband, life partner, hung between them, a promise and a plea. Transfer at 95%, Ellis reported quietly. For more minutes. Kale nodded. Perfect timing. He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against Lyra's in a gesture that had become their own private ritual of connection. Then he straightened, checked his weapon one last time, and moved toward the door. When the transfer completes, don't wait, he instructed Ellis. Get her out. With that, he stepped into the corridor, hands raised, allowing the Xylo's security forces that had broken through the defensive line to surround him. They relieved him of his weapon and marched him toward the central hub, where Forlag waited. The outpost's heart showed the scars of battle, scorch marks on walls, overturned market stalls, the detritus of a community suddenly transformed into a war zone. Residents who had been unable to reach shelter areas huddled under guard, their faces showing a mixture of fear and defiance. Commander Forlag stood in the center of the space, as immaculate as if he'd just stepped off his command bridge rather than led an assault. His cold eyes assessed Kale with clinical interest. The miner who defied a corporation, he said, a hint of fascination in his voice. I've reviewed your file since our last encounter. Impressive survival instincts. A shame they failed you now. Kale kept his expression neutral. Every moment of this conversation was another moment for the transfer to complete, for Lyra to reach safety. Where is the Lirani? Forlock demanded. I told you. Gone. Weeks ago. Forlock smiled was Hatsosin. A convenient claim. Unfortunately for you, our scans detected unique energy signatures consistent with Lirani biological processes within this outpost less than an hour ago. Kale maintained his composure, though inwardly he cursed the effectiveness of Xylos's scanning technology. He needed to keep Forlag talking, focused on him rather than organizing a renewed search. Maybe your machines are picking up residual traces, he suggested. She was here, yes, but she left. With what transport? Forlag counted. We've monitored all departures from this outpost for the past month. Nothing matches our profile for potential Lirani evacuation. You're not the only ones with stealth technology, Kale said, allowing a hint of smugness to enter his voice, hoping to provoke Forlag's pride. You'd be surprised what independent operators can accomplish when properly motivated. The gambit worked. Forlag's expression darkened with professional indignation. Our tracking systems are the most advanced in corporate space. No independent vessel could. An alarm cut through the conversation, a proximity alert different from the earlier warnings. One of Forlag's officers approached rapidly, speaking urgently into his ear. The commander's expression shifted to one of controlled fury. It seems we have another arrival. Multiple vessels approaching from the outer asteroid field, bearing accord markings. He fixed Kale with a penetrating stare. You were stalling. Kale allowed himself a small smile. Ellis must have sent out an emergency call to the Accord network when the attack began. Help had arrived, perhaps just in time. Forelag raised his weapon, aiming directly at Kale's heart. Where is she? Last chance. Before Kale could respond, the lights throughout the central hub flickered wildly. Electrical systems surged and failed in rapid succession. The Xylos troops' armor displays flashed warning messages before going dark. And there, at the entrance to the hub, stood Lyra. Her bioluminescent markings blazed with an intensity Kale had never witnessed, pulsing waves of energy visibly radiating from her slender form. Her eyes, normally deep indigo, now shone with inner light. "I am here, Forelag," she said, her voice carrying effortlessly across the space without need of translation. "The one you seek, the knowledge you covet." Forelag swung his weapon toward her, but it sparked uselessly in his hand, overloaded by the same energy that was disrupting all electronic systems in the vicinity. "The transfer is complete," Lyra continued, advancing slowly into the hub. "The knowledge of my people is now secure beyond your reach forever, distributed among those who will use it wisely, guarded by those who understand its true purpose." Kale stared in amazement. He had never seen Lyra like this, radiant with power, her natural abilities magnified beyond what she had previously shown. This, he realized, was the Lyrani at her full potential, the scientist and keeper of knowledge whom Xylos had sought to capture and exploit. Forlag's face contorted with rage. "Secure the Lyrani," he shouted to his troops. "All available force authorized." The Xylos security forces moved to comply, but found themselves suddenly unable to advance. Invisible barriers of energy formed wherever Lyra directed her gaze, forcing them back. Those who attempted to press forward were repelled by shocks of bioelectric force that left them temporarily paralyzed, their nervous systems overwhelmed. "Impossible," Forelag hissed, his usual composure fracturing. "Our research indicated no Lyrani could generate this level of energy without technological amplification." "Your research was incomplete," Lyra replied calmly, "as all attempts to weaponize life inevitably are." The outpost shuddered as the newly arrived Accord vessels engaged the Dominion in orbit. Through the viewport behind Forelag, Kale could see flashes of weapons fire in the darkness of space. Taking advantage of the distraction, Kale moved away from his captors, positioning himself nearer to Lyra. The Xylos troops, their attention divided between the glowing alien, their increasingly desperate commander, and the space battle unfolding outside, failed to stop him. "This doesn't end here," Forelag snarled, backing toward the corridor that led to his shuttle bay. "Xylos controls worlds, resources beyond your comprehension. We will find every copy of your precious knowledge and destroy those who harbor it." "Perhaps," Lyra acknowledged, her radiance undiminished. "But not today, and not before the knowledge begins its work." From the communication system came a new voice, Ellis, broadcasting from the secure facility. "Attention all outpost residents and defenders. Accord reinforcements have engaged the Xylos vessel. Evacuation protocols are now active. Proceed to designated areas immediately." Forelag made a sharp gesture to his remaining security forces. "Fall back to extraction point. Priority mission is now withdrawal with current intelligence." His cold eyes locked on Lyra one final time. "This isn't over, Lyrani. Not while Xylos stands." As the Xylos forces began an organized retreat toward their boarding shuttles, Kale reached Lyra's side. Up close, he could feel the energy radiating from her, warm, vibrant, but controlled with incredible precision. "You were supposed to evacuate," he said, unable to keep the relief from his voice. "Could not leave without you," she replied, her gaze still fixed on the retreating Xylos troops to ensure they didn't attempt a final assault. "Life partners, remember? Facing dangers together." The bioelectric field surrounding her gradually diminished as the immediate threat receded, though her markings still pulsed with extraordinary brightness. As the energy faded, exhaustion became visible on her face, the cost of such a display of power clearly taking its toll. Kale supported her as they joined the stream, of outpost residents heading for the evacuation points. The transfer? It really completed? Lyra nodded, leaning against him as her strength ebbed. Complete and confirmed. Ellis's network received all data, already distributing to secure locations throughout Accord territory. The outpost trembled again, more violently this time. Through passing viewports, they could see the Dominion exchanging fire with several smaller but agile vessels bearing the distinctive markings of the Accord. A stylized open hand with a star at its center, the symbol of shared knowledge and mutual protection. At the evacuation point, Ellis was coordinating the boarding of residents on transport vessels that would scatter to various Accord outposts and settlements. When she saw Kale and Lyra, relief washed over her face. You made it. The knowledge transfer was confirmed at all primary nodes. She gestured to a nearby transport. That one's bound for New Haven Station, the largest Accord research facility. They're expecting you both. The outpost, Kale asked, looking around at the place that had briefly become their home. Ellis's expression tightened. Compromised. We'll evacuate everyone, salvage what we can, but Harmony as we knew it is finished. Xylos will report its location to other corporations once they withdraw. Sadira, the outpost director, approached them, her cybernetic arm showing damage from the fighting. Your presence brought this, she said, but her tone held resignation rather than accusation. But it was always a possibility we accepted when we chose this life. At least our people will survive, and your knowledge is secured. We will help rebuild. Lyra promised. Somewhere new, somewhere safer. Sadira nodded grimly. The Accord always rebuilds. It's what we do. As they boarded the transport bound for New Haven, Kale cast a final glance at Harmony Outpost through the viewport, the patchwork of habitats and repurposed structures that had offered them sanctuary, however brief. Explosions bloomed silently in space around it as the battle continued, Accord forces buying time for the evacuation to complete. The transport disengaged from the docking port and accelerated away, joining a scattered formation of vessels all heading in different directions, a survival strategy to ensure that even if some were captured, others would reach safety. Kale and Lyra found a quiet corner of the passenger compartment, away from the other evacuees. Lyra's extraordinary display of power had left her drained, her bioluminescence now just a soft glow compared to its earlier brilliance. What you did back there, Kale said quietly. I've never seen anything like it. Lyra's large eyes, once again their normal deep indigo, regarded him with a mixture of weariness and pride. Full expression of Lorani abilities, rarely used, taxing on body systems. She leaned against him, seeking support and comfort. We'll need time to recover fully. You'll have it, he promised. Once we reach New Haven. If we reach New Haven, she corrected gently. Xylos may still pursue. As if summoned by her words, the transport's captain announced over the internal communications system. Attention passengers. The Dominion has broken off engagement with Accord forces and is pursuing evacuation vessels. Evasive protocols engaged. Please secure yourselves for potential high-G maneuvers. Kale helped Lyra strap into one of the acceleration couches as the transport surged forward, its engines straining at maximum output. Through the viewport, the stars became streaks as the pilot executed a series of rapid course changes designed to confuse pursuit. We need to help, Lyra insisted, though her exhaustion was evident. My abilities? You've done enough, Kale said firmly. More than enough. Let others fight this part of the battle. The journey to New Haven became a tense game of cat and mouse through the asteroid field and beyond. The transport's captain, clearly experienced in evasion tactics, used every natural feature of space to their advantage, hiding behind larger asteroids, skimming dangerously close to gravitational anomalies, executing blind jumps through regions of intense radiation that disrupted sensors. Twice they received encrypted updates from other evacuation vessels. One had been captured by Xylos forces, another had successfully reached an Accord outpost. The fate of the remaining transports remained unknown. On the third day of their flight, as they entered a dense nebula that would help mask their energy signature, Lyra's condition deteriorated suddenly. Her bioluminescent markings, which had been gradually brightening as she recovered, dimmed alarmingly. Her skin grew cool to the touch, and her breathing became shallow and rapid. "Medical emergency," Kale called out, drawing the attention of the transport's assigned medic, a former corporate healthcare specialist who had defected to the Accord years earlier. The medic scanned Lyra with portable diagnostic equipment, frowning at the readings. "Her biochemistry is unlike anything in our database. These energy readings, it's as if her cellular structures are in some kind of flux." "Energy depletion," Lyra managed to whisper, her voice barely audible. "Used too much. Core systems struggling to rebalance." "What can we do?" Kale asked desperately. The medic shook her head helplessly. "Without understanding her biology better, I'm afraid to attempt any intervention. It could do more harm than good." Lyra's hand sought Kale's, her grip surprisingly strong despite her weakened state. "Need resonance anchor," she explained. "Stabilizing presence." "You? Me? But I'm not Lorani. I don't have your abilities." "Not about abilities," she insisted. "Connection. Bond you share. Strong enough." Following her weak instructions, Kale placed one hand over her heart and the other against her temple, where the bioluminescent markings formed their most complex patterns. The medic watched with skeptical fascination as Lyra guided Kale through a process she called resonance synchronization. "Focus on rhythm," Lyra instructed. "Your heartbeat. My heartbeat. Find harmony between." Kale closed his eyes, concentrating as she directed. At first, he felt nothing but the warmth of her skin beneath his palms and the rapid, irregular beating of her heart. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, something changed, a subtle vibration that seemed to pass between them, a sense of connection deeper than physical touch. The medic gasped, drawing Kale's attention. Opening his eyes, he saw what had surprised her. The bioluminescent markings on Lyra's body had brightened slightly, and more remarkably, where his hands touched her skin, a faint glow had begun to emanate from his own flesh, as if her luminescence was somehow transferring to him. "Impossible," the medic whispered. "Human physiology shouldn't be capable of bioresonance response." "Not impossible," Lyra said, her voice already stronger. "Rare. Special connection." The synchronization continued for hours, Kale maintaining physical contact while following Lyra's gentle guidance through the process. Gradually, her condition stabilized. Her markings returned to a healthy glow, her breathing regulated, and the alarming readings on the medic's scanner normalized. When she finally drifted into a healing sleep, the medic drew Kale aside. "I've never seen anything like that," she admitted. "In all my years of xenomedicine, I've never observed successful bioenergetic transfer between species. It shouldn't be possible without technological mediation." Kale watched Lyra's peaceful form, remembering her words about the bond between them. Life partners forged in fire, souls who had witnessed each other's true nature. "Maybe there are connections your scanners can't measure," he suggested quietly. The medic studied him thoughtfully. "Perhaps. Whatever it is, you saved her life, and potentially provided a breakthrough in cross-species medical treatment that the Accord will find invaluable." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You should rest too. That kind of energy exchange takes a toll, even if you can't feel it yet." She was right. As the adrenaline of the crisis faded, Kale felt a bone-deep exhaustion unlike anything he'd experienced before, as if he'd been running for days without rest. He settled into the acceleration couch beside Lyra's, their hands still loosely intertwined, and fell into a dreamless sleep. He awoke to the gentle pressure of Lyra's fingers tracing the lines of his face. Opening his eyes, he found her watching him with an expression of wonder and profound affection, her markings pulsing in the pattern he had come to associate with deep emotion. "You did the impossible," she said softly. "Resonated with me. Sustained me." Kale took her hand, noting that the faint luminescence that had appeared on his skin during the synchronization had faded, but left an almost imperceptible pattern like a ghost of her markings. "I just followed your instructions." "No," she shook her head. "Required more. Required openness, vulnerability, complete trust." Her large eyes searched his. In my culture, such resonance between bondmates is celebrated, expected. Between different species? Never documented. Never thought possible. Before Kale could respond, the transport shuddered violently, throwing them against their restraints. The captain's voice came urgently over the communication system. All passengers secure for emergency maneuvers. We have company. Dominion just dropped out of FTL directly in our path. The viewport filled with the ominous silhouette of Forlag's command ship, its weapons ports glowing with charged energy. The transport banked sharply, attempting to evade, but in open space without the cover of asteroids or nebula, they were at a severe disadvantage. They tracked us somehow, Kale muttered, helping Lyra secure herself more firmly as the transport executed a series of desperate evasive maneuvers. The communications system crackled with an incoming transmission, Forlag's voice as coldly confident as ever. Accord transport resilience. This is Commander Forlag of the Xylo's enforcement vessel Dominion. Your engines are targeted. Surrender the Lorani Fugitive immediately or face destruction. The transport captain's response was defiant. Dominion, we are a civilian vessel carrying evacuees. Targeting us violates multiple interstellar conventions on humanitarian conflict. The Accord will respond with full force. Forlag's laugh held no humor. Conventions apply to recognized entities, Captain. The Accord has no official standing. Now, final warning, surrender the Lorani, or I give the order to fire. Lyra's grip on Kale's hand tightened. Cannot let others die for me, she whispered, her markings pulsing with distress. We're not giving up, Kale assured her, though he could see no way out of their predicament. The transport was no match for the Dominion's firepower or speed. The captain's voice came again, directed to all passengers. Evacuation pods prepped and ready. All non-essential personnel prepare for emergency departure on my mark. It was a desperate gamble. Launching multiple evacuation pods in different directions might allow some passengers to escape while the Dominion focused on the main transport. But the pods were small, with limited life support and no FTL capability. Survival would depend on being picked up by friendly vessels. As they prepared to move toward the evacuation pod section, a new alarm sounded, proximity alerts from a different vector. Through the viewport, Kale saw a ripple in space as multiple vessels dropped out of FTL almost simultaneously, surrounding the Dominion. The lead vessel was unlike anything he had seen before, elegant and organic in design, with flowing lines that reminded him of Lyra's bioluminescent patterns. It radiated energy readings that caused the transport sensors to fluctuate wildly. Lyra gasped, her markings suddenly blazing with intensity. Lorani, she exclaimed, pressing close to the viewport. A Lorani Guardian vessel. My people live. Sure enough, the new arrivals immediately engaged the Dominion, surrounding it with precisely coordinated attacks that seemed to target specific systems rather than attempting to destroy the vessel outright. The Dominion returned fire, but its weapons appeared strangely ineffective against the Lorani ship's defenses. The transport's communication system came alive with a new voice, melodic and resonant like Lyra's, but deeper. Accord transport resilience. This is Guardian Tellus of the Lorani Preservation Fleet. We have tracked the resonance signature of one of our own aboard your vessel. Hold position and prepare for protective escort. The transport captain's reply was immediate and relieved. Guardian Tellus, this is Captain Mercer of the Resilience. We have indeed been protecting a Lorani scientist. We gladly accept your escort. As the battle between the Lorani vessels and the Dominion continued, Lyra pressed her palm against the viewport, her markings pulsing in complex patterns that seemed almost like communication. The lead Lorani vessel altered course slightly in response, moving to position itself between the transport and the Dominion. They sense me, Lyra explained, wonder in her voice. The resonance connection, like calling to like across space. The Dominion, outmatched by the coordinated Lorani attack, began to withdraw, its engines glowing with emergency power as Forlag apparently ordered a retreat. The Lorani vessels did not pursue. instead forming a protective formation around the transport. A shuttle detached from the lead Lorani vessel and approached the transport's docking bay. Minutes later, the captain announced the arrival of Lorani representatives requesting to meet with their rescued countrywoman. In the transport's small conference room, Kale stood nervously at Lyra's side as the door opened to admit 3 Lorani. They were similar to Lyra in their basic form, slender, with the same ice blue skin and bioluminescent markings, but with subtle variations in height, build, and the specific patterns of their luminescence. The foremost Lorani, taller and with more elaborate markings that suggested greater age or status, stepped forward. For a moment, he simply regarded Lyra with large, indigo eyes identical to hers. Then, without warning, his markings brightened intensely, the patterns shifting rapidly in what Kale recognized as their form of emotional expression. Lyra responded in kind, her own markings pulsing in patterns too complex and rapid for Kale to follow. No words were spoken, but it was clearly a profound exchange of information and feeling. Finally, the lead Lorani turned his attention to Kale, studying him with an intensity that felt almost physical. "You are the human who protected our scientist," he said, his voice carrying the same musical quality as Lyra's, but rendered in perfect English without need of translation. "I am," Kale confirmed, feeling oddly formal in the presence of these beings. "Our resonance scanners detected something unprecedented, a non-Lorani carrying a resonance echo of our kind." The Lorani's gaze moved to Kale's hands, where the ghost-like traces of luminescence still lingered faintly. "You shared life energy with Lyra. She was dying," Kale explained simply. "I did what she told me to do." The Lorani's markings pulsed in what might have been surprise or curiosity. Not all beings could have accomplished this. The resonance compatibility required is extraordinary. Lyra moved closer to Kale, taking his hand in hers, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that needed no translation across species. "I have called him Elvari," she said to her kinsman. "Life bonded." The announcement created a visible reaction among the Lorani, their markings flickering in complex patterns as they communicated silently among themselves. Finally, the leader addressed them both. "I am Guardian Tellus, of the Council of Preservation. We believed Lyra lost with all others at the research facility. Finding her alive, and with the knowledge preserved, is beyond our highest hopes." His large eyes moved between them. "And finding her bonded to a human, this is unprecedented in our history." "There is much to explain," Lyra acknowledged. "About Xylos, about the Accord Network, now protecting copies of our knowledge, about the bond between Kale and myself." Tellus nodded. "And there is much we must share with you as well." After the attack on the research facility, the surviving Lorani scattered across the stars, establishing hidden colonies and preservation vessels like ours. "We have been gathering strength, rebuilding what was lost, searching for others of our kind." "How many survived?" Lyra asked, her voice catching slightly. "Thousands," Tellus replied gently. "Not the millions of our homeworld, but enough to ensure our future. And now, with you and your knowledge returned to us, that future grows brighter." The room fell silent as the implications settled over everyone present. Kale felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at Lyra's reunion with her people, joy that she was not the last of her kind as she had feared, and an unspoken question about what this meant for the bond between them. As if sensing his thoughts, Lyra's grip on his hand tightened. "Where I go, Kale goes," she said to Tellus, her tone making it clear this was not a request but a statement of fact. "We are bonded. Our paths are one." Tellus studied them both for a long moment before his markings pulsed in what appeared to be acceptance. "The Elvari bond is sacred in our tradition, not to be questioned or severed, regardless of the beings it joins." He inclined his head slightly toward Kale. "If Lyra has called you life-bonded, then you are welcome among the Lorani, human Kale. Your protection of our scientist and her knowledge has already earned our gratitude. Your bond with her makes you family." The transport captain entered, interrupting the moment. "Guardian Tellus, Captain Mercer here." I've just received word from Accord Command. The Dominion has withdrawn from the sector, but long-range sensors detect additional Xylos vessels on approach. They're not giving up. Tellus nodded gravely. They will not cease until the knowledge is secured or destroyed. We must reach safer territory. He turned to Lyra and Kale. Will you join us on the Guardian vessel? We can provide better protection, and there are matters of great importance to discuss regarding the future deployment of the resonance technology. Lyra looked to Kale, a question in her eyes. This was a turning point. Joining the Lorani fleet would mean fully embracing a new life among her people, far from the human territories Kale had known. Together, Kale said simply, answering her unspoken question, whatever comes next, we face it together. Her markings brightened with joy and relief. Turning back to Tellus, she nodded. We will join you, but we must also maintain connection with the Accord network. The knowledge distribution has already begun, and these allies have proven their commitment to using it wisely. A new kind of collaboration, Tellus mused, his markings pulsing thoughtfully. Perhaps this is the path forward. Not isolation, but carefully chosen alliances. Much has changed since the attack. Perhaps we must change as well. As they prepare to transfer to the Lorani vessel, Kale stood with Lyra before the viewport one last time, looking out at the stars that had once represented his exile and now promised a future he could never have imagined. Are you certain? Lyra asked softly. Life among my people will be unfamiliar. Kale smiled, touching the faint traces of luminescence that now permanently marked his skin where they had connected. 7 years ago, I chose isolation because I had lost everything worth fighting for. Then you crashed into my life. He brushed his fingers gently along the bioluminescent patterns of her cheek. Now I have someone worth any adjustment, any challenge. Husband, she said in English, the word carrying all the weight and meaning of their shared journey. Wife, he replied, then carefully pronounced the Lorani word she had taught him, an Elvari. The transport shuddered slightly as the Lorani Guardian vessel extended a docking tunnel, creating a secure passage between the ships. Ahead lay uncertainty. Xylos would not abandon its pursuit. The distributed knowledge would transform countless worlds in ways they couldn't fully predict, and Kale's adaptation to life among the Lorani would undoubtedly present challenges. But as they stepped together toward the airlock that would take them to their new life, neither looked back. The solitary mining outpost, the desperate flight, the battles, all were chapters completed. What mattered now was the story they would write together, a human and a Lorani, bound by choices made in the face of death, by courage shown in moments of truth, and by a connection that transcended the boundaries of species and space. As the airlock cycled open, revealing the organic, luminescent interior of the Lorani vessel, Kale felt Lyra's hand slip into his, their fingers intertwining in what had become their most natural gesture. Whatever the stars held for them next, they would face it as they had faced everything since that fateful crash in the asteroid field, side by side, stronger together than they ever could have been. Apart.